I didn't want to record many minutes of just waiting around in the beginning to, anyway. So I have the biomechanics assignment. It's something you can download from my courses, but and there's 3 parts. So I'm just going to emphasize here exactly what I want. So to try and help you, kind of know the scope of what I'm looking for. So the first part is about muscles and movement. Essentially, I want you to look at muscle groups that are used in the major form of forward locomotion of different animals. The fish, the frog is hopping, the fish is swimming, bipedal running, quadrupedal running, slithering, and a snake. There's all these different ways that animals move, very diverse movements. And essentially, it's so simple. You just have to compare the axial muscles and the appendicular muscles, which one is more dominant in the movement, and then attempt to compare whether you think they're thick, right? Are they thicker or thinner, right? So some sort of trait feature, the muscle fiber. Remember all those muscle fiber traits we had. So try to compare like among these animals, how the axial and appendicular muscles are different. So pretty straightforward. I give you the animals here. The second part is animal gaits. So I gave you here on this slide. So this is what your assignment says. You want to identify different gaits in diverse animals. So a gait is sort of how their feet fall in sequence, right? So is it like left hind foot? What sequence do the feet fall in quadrupedal animals? If it's a rabbit, for example, right, it's like both forefeet and then the hind feet come around and hit in front of it, right? So there's like different ways that you can do. So here, like for example, here's what I just described, a bound with the rabbit. So here, this is a way to draw it. So on this axis, it's left hind foot, left forefoot, right forefoot, right hind foot. So they all have the same x-axis here. And then on this axis, this is, 100% just means like one stride, meaning all 4 feet, once all 4 feet have been used, and then it repeats, obviously, if you're running left, right, left, right. So in this case, here, look, both 4 feet are down. So you can imagine a rabbit like putting his foot down, both 4 feet down, and then the back feet come around and the 4 feet lift up, and then the back feet hit, right? So this is a bound of the rabbit, right? And here's like gallops, different types of gallops, trots, right, left, right, left, right. So you can see it's very diverse. It's something that most people don't think about very much, but it's actually the coordination of how the feet fall, right, and in different animals for running, right? Sometimes it's left and right together on either side, right? So that's a different way. So what I want you to do is just simply look at some animals and make one of these graphs. So this black line is like how long that foot is staying on the ground during the one full stride length. Okay, any questions about that? It's just looking at diversity of gaits.
Make those graphs in Excel, or do we just draw them?
Yeah, you can draw them, you can make them, however you want to make them. Yeah. Drawing is fine, or you can make them in whatever program.
Then take a picture of it, throw it in the Word document. That's okay.
Yeah, sure. PowerPoint also is if you, or whatever, Google Sheets or something. They have little shapes, so you can just take the way to do it too. So okay, so the third part is limb postures and body size. 3. So this again, it's like a qualitative observation, but what you're gonna, it's comparing limb postures. So the theory is that larger body size animals, heavier animals, have a more erect posture, like this elephant here, and smaller ones have more splayed posture. You see the limbs are going out and down like this. It's not erect like the elephant. So what I want you to do is just find a few examples of that and see if that theory holds up. Do you find any exceptions? Did they show that expected pattern of the body size having a more erect posture at the body size? So just look at a bunch of animal pictures, select some, and then discuss. That's it. Very short, one paragraph. That's it. Okay, so this should be pretty straightforward. Any questions about that before I move on? Okay, so today I want to lecture about the digestive system. I did upload these, the handout for these slides just about 10 minutes ago. So if you want to grab them. So I have the first part of this lecture is about the oral cavity and feeding mechanisms, teeth. And then the second part is more the rest of the digestive system. Okay, so a lot of this is probably been covered in some other courses if you've ever had an anatomy course or even in lower level classes. So apologize if it's very simplistic. All right, so the mouth opening is, we've talked about this before, it's either the oral cavity or the buccal cavity, both these words are used. Excuse me. There's different types of feeding, suspension or filter feeding. This is what we talked about with the urochordates, the cephalochordates, but most of the animals with a jaw, of course, have one of these two types, suction feeding or ram feeding. Suction feeding is what we talked about also with the respiratory system, where you're kind of creating a vacuum by expanding the buccal cavity and drawing in the water. So most fishes have this type of suction feeding. Where essentially it's like the ram ventilation, where their mouth is open and they just swim. So in this case, they're just overtaking the prey by swimming fast, and the prey, they just inertia moves the food towards the throat. In terrestrial vertebrates, that's essentially what they use as ram feeding. So they're running down a predator, and their mouth attacks it, and then the way that they get it down their throat is by using the tongue to move the food back, okay, rather than the water movement in fishes. So in terrestrial vertebrates, it's ram feeding. It'd be hard to have a suction hard enough in air to suck in your prey, right? Okay, and there's lots of convergence in feeding mechanisms. So lots of diversity in that. Okay, so looking at the buccal cavity, here's a chimp and a human, just to show. There's the tongue on the bottom here, right? This area is called the pharynx, and this is the larynx. We talked about that yesterday as well with the respiratory system. Not yesterday, but whenever, Tuesday. Pharynx at the back of the throat, larynx is where the vocal cords are, and where the trachea and esophagus are divided. Tongue movement, very important in eating. So that's why tetrapods have tongues, right? To get the food back to where it needs to be. The tongue is the hyoid apparatus is the main system that's controlling the tongue movements, so the hyoid apparatus and the associated muscles. And teeth are the first well, they're for both grabbing and holding on to prey, before you can get it down the throat, or they are for the primary processing in some of the mammals. That's what evolves. But ancestrally, the teeth are not really part of the breaking down of the tissue for your food. They're more of the just grabbing and holding, sort of. So they're a predatory, sort of assisting in the predation. They can be. We can talk about oral teeth, which are, of course, like our teeth up in the buccal cavity, or pharyngeal teeth. So the pharynx, right at the back of the throat. Some animals have pharyngeal teeth. Many fishes have them. So here's the pharyngeal teeth in this fish. Here's the oral teeth, oral jaws. So you can see, in this case, if the prey item went in here, they would bite it. They would have some suction. It would be pulled back. And the pharyngeal teeth would start crushing it. So for animals, for example, that eat like mollusks or something that needs to be crushed, broken down, the pharyngeal teeth down, so it's not just shoved back into the stomach. So teeth are, if they're true teeth, they are always bony. So they have the bone and then the enamel dentine over top of them, which we'll talk about in a second, rather than the keratin teeth of the lamprey. So those hardened, that horny like teeth of the lamprey is not true teeth, right? Those are keratin. In shark teeth are dermal denticles, so they are teeth in that they have dentine, but they're essentially modified scales, right? So we talked about the the types of scales in the integument lecture, right, where they have the dentine and enamel and bone together. So the shark teeth are essentially modified scales, and they have these rows. You guys know about this, where they're not rooted. They just have these rows that form, and then the functional row sort of flips out, and that's the biting surface, and then they eventually fall out. That's why if you walk along certain areas, you can actually find shark's teeth in the sand, right? Because they're always shedding them. They're not true teeth in that they don't have a bony root. So true teeth, what they call true teeth, have these three types of progenitor cells that produce these three types of structural tissue. So ameloblasts is the name of so when it says blast, that means a progenitor cell that's going to form, the type of cells. So ameloblasts are those cells that produce enamel. Odontoblasts are dentine, and osteoblasts develop into bone. And as we discussed in the integument lecture again, that there are epidermal organs, epithelial organs sometimes they're called. They are formed, they start out being formed the same for hair and feathers and glands and all that as a signaling interaction between the epidermis and the dermis. They form a little placode, and then they go on to be specified into whatever organ it is. And teeth are one of the organs that comes from that sort of conserved interaction between the two skin layers. Call it. And then they put down layers. So so here's the epidermis. Can you see what I'm pointing to, hopefully? And then there's the dermis, right? And there's this dermal papilla. So it's a little condensation, little like placoid forms. So this is sort of, if you think about it, this is in the gums of the developing embryo. So the teeth don't form on top, right? They're developing all in a little pouch in the gums. And then they put down the layers, these hard layers, the ameloblast, the enamel and dentine, right? The bone is forming underneath this dark tissue here, right? It's all formed, and the full shape of the tooth is formed in the gum before it even erupts, right? So it is it's interesting phenomenon. It's that the upper jaw and the lower jaw have to form their teeth completely, the shapes of the teeth separately in each jaw, and they have to occlude. So when you take a bite, right, they're meeting correctly to slice if it's a carnassial tooth, then it has to have some edges that meet to slice the meat, or if it's a grinding tooth, so it's an interesting scenario where the occlusion of the teeth, the coming together of them, it has to evolve very closely, and tooth shapes vary a lot. So. All right, so anyway, it develops in the gum and then it erupts. So here's the eruption of the tooth, right, out into the buccal cavity. So true teeth have enamel and dentine, and they have the roots that are set in bone. So they're attached in bone very strongly. Here's a tooth. This is it has a couple cusps on it here, right? So these tips are called the cusps. This line here represents the sort of the gum line. So the top that's out in the mouth is called the crown, and this is called the root that's in. Right. And there's a root canal, as you see here. If anybody's ever had a root canal, if that's what they're talking about, is this is drilled out. All right, so here's there's a bunch of words for teeth that I'm going to go through now, so that shows the diversity. Excuse me. Thecodont means that the tooth lies in a deep socket in the bone, just like the ones we've been showing you. So these are called thecodont. So if it says thecodont, that means it's got a nice deep hard root that's holding it in. Acrodont is very, it's just basically plopped on top of the bone. It's not stuck in it doesn't have this nice little socket. Okay, there's no socket, so it's just stuck on top. It still has the bone, it's still a true tooth, but it's not like really sort of bound in that socket. So that's called acrodont tooth. And then pleurodont tooth is where the tooth lies alongside the bone like this. So this is actually very helpful in studying the relationships in the fossil record, because the teeth and bone are some of the hard structures that persist in the fossil record. So these types of tooth roots and how the teeth are arranged next to the bone are helpful characters for developing phylogenies. Here's some arrangements of reptile teeth that are, some of them are very derived, strange teeth, but I've shown you some of these when we went through the skeletal system. So just notice that most of them are all simple conical teeth. So meaning they all have just like one cusp, the simple cone shape. So here's Sphenodon, here's a snake, and they have palatine teeth. So they're kind of, it's like a second row of teeth on the palatine bones. Here's an alligator, another kind of lizard. It has a little more rounded teeth. And this one is a shark, actually. This is kind of, I actually don't know much about this. Another variety. Okay, so that's so the ancestors have the simple conical teeth and some diversity of where they put them in their mouth and how they sit them next to the bone. But the evolution of the mammals, the teeth are that there's a lot of diversity in mammal teeth, and I'm going to talk about how that came about and some of that special diversity in mammals. So in the mammals, we have the evolution of molars. So as I said, the ancestral condition is a single conical tooth. Then in evolution, it becomes multicuspid, so that it's just there's the cone shaped, and then there's little cusps on the side, but it's still kind of in a line like this. I think I have a picture. I should throw a picture in for that. But anyway, they so like dog teeth, if you know dog teeth. And then there's trigonid, which is where the innovation is that it goes it makes a triangle. So if you look at it from the top, it's like a triangle. So instead of just being in a line with the cusps in a line, now we have some width to the tooth, right? That was like big innovation. Those are called tribosphenic teeth because of the groups that in the fossil record that showed those. And then the last innovation is this hypocone, which takes that triangle and then squares it off to the square crown that like our teeth have, right? So we have that fourth cusp to square it off, the hypocone. So this is like really amazingly well documented in the fossil record. There's this beautiful series of transitional fossils. You can detect when these shapes, because the shapes are preserved, right? And so you can see, it's like all triangle teeth, right? And then it's then they've evolved the hypocone, right? So you can see this evolution. So here's example. This is the tribosphenic teeth. You can see this triangle shape, and each, you know, there's a lot of I tell you, teeth people are just like, they're obsessed with naming everything. So anyway, the hypocone is that fourth cusp starts evolving in the mammals, the stick out. And what's so important about that is that increases the surface area for grinding, right? So for, now the mammal molar has the ability to process food and to process it in different ways, right? Like the herbivore teeth, and you can have the slicing teeth with little, valleys and things. So we start getting a lot of diversity in mammal molars related to the first processing of food. This I just mentioned about all these. Here's some of the fossil record. Each of these little bumps has a name, right? You don't have to worry about those, but just showing you how these things are tracked so precisely. And here's a nice view of that occlusion I was talking about. So that where they have to evolve the top jaw and the bottom jaw, and how they can fit together. It's an interesting developmental story of kind of coevolution of these two upper jaw and lower jaw system to be very tightly regulated. As you know, in your own mouth, there are different kinds of teeth. Having different kinds of teeth in your mouth is called heterodonty, as opposed to having all, cone-shaped teeth like the alligator or something. So we have incisors, which are intended for biting and holding, right? So if you were going to eat, like say a banana or something, right, you would use your incisors to bite it off. But if you were going to eat something really like tough, like say like a raw carrot, you wouldn't use your incisors. That would kind of hurt, right? So you go for your canines because that's a stronger bite, right? So that's for like the ripping of flesh, like really sticking in. So even though we have small canines, we have that difference in how you bite, where you put that food item. And then the molars are for grinding, for chewing, right? So the chewing molars. Some molars are, I think I've got, some molars are shaped so that they will slice, and some are more for grinding. So they've got like a wide surface area. I think I have some pictures of it. Here's well, here's a mule deer, which is a herbivore. This is also, here they have incisors. There's a little canine, and then there's a space that has no teeth. So this is called the diastema. Hypsodont, I think I spelled it wrong, I'm sorry, correcting things here. Hypsodont teeth is a special kind of high crowned molar and so wear down teeth. So grasses have, essentially they have like silica, it's like very hard, almost glass, they're chewing, and it wears down enamel over time. And so this is horses and those groups that eat grasses as for their food, they have evolved very high, they're called high crowned molars. So here's this enamel is very, they have a very large crown, so that as it wears down, so this will wear down, and then it just keeps erupting. So it keeps coming out of the gum as it wears down the crown. It has like enamel to spare, right? So it just keeps coming up so that the tooth lasts longer, even though it's being worn away by the abrasive plant. A brachiodont is the name for one that has a low crown and a very deep root. So that's the opposite. Here's some varieties of teeth. Elephant tusks are they are ever-growing incisors. So the tusks are incisors. The molars are interesting in elephants. They are the way that they get around their worn out teeth from eating grass and constantly being abraded, is that they will continually replace their molars from the posterior, and then the teeth actually will fall out the front. So they have I forget how many, it's a number of teeth, I think, that they I forget how many. So like, it's written here. Okay, so there's like 6 molars that they go through in their life. So at 2 to 3 years old in the elephant, they have 3 molars. Then 7 to 9 years old, there's a new one coming in the back here, right? So then they've got molar 3 and 4, 5, 4 and 5, and 6 coming in, 5 and 6, and then so this is at 45 years old. They're on their 5th and 6th molar, right? I think I showed you this in the when I was showing you the skulls, that beaver incisors have one side of their incisor has enamel on it, and the other side does not. It's just exposed dentine, which is softer tissue. So then when the incisors meet, they're constantly sharpening each other, because the tip is the sharp edge of the enamel, and as it's meeting, it's kind of wearing down the dentine on the inside, and so it keeps these sharp tips, and that's how they keep the ability to gnaw through wood, because they never wear down. Their incisors are ever growing, meaning they grow throughout their life. They don't have like their shape set. names of different kinds of mammal teeth. See this beautiful square. This is called the bonodont teeth, these little rounded cusps. Lophodont has this little edge like this. I think this is more like a rhinoceros has this kind of teeth. Yeah, there's like all these varieties of how you can make sharp edges for slicing your food. Here's what's called carnassial teeth, which are in the strict carnivores. They have these slicing molars. Here's a good demonstration how they go right next to each other and literally will slice meat like a knife. Right, their paws can't use fork and knife like we can. They have to use their teeth, right? So they have these sharp slicing teeth to cut the meat. Here's the grinding teeth, and in herbivores, this is a horse. Again, has a diastema. That's where the bit goes if you're riding a horse. It's not actually on its teeth; it's in the diastema. And then these grinding teeth behind it, and they have very so they have these like rows of sort of rows of sharp edges, but they're very low, set like this here. And they move them back and forth like that. So they're grinding the grasses. And then here's another one. This is the crushing teeth of, for example, hyenas. You can see they're essentially fitting one tooth inside of a cone of another. So it's this kind of crushing. If they're like bone eaters, like hyenas will crush tissue, compression. Here's some specializations. A narwhal is an upper left incisor, rarely a right incisor. And so this narwhal horn, is actually a spirally forming upper left incisor, just one side. We talked about the elephant tusks already. Those are both upper incisors. The walrus tusk is a canine, so a different tooth, right? So there's some cutting teeth in the tarsier here. Here's porpoise, has little peg-like teeth. Anteaters don't have any teeth. Baleen whales don't have any teeth. You can use teeth to age animals because they will add cementum on top of it as they grow. Okay, so now, so the next part is the oral glands. So along with grinding, biting, and the initial processing of food, the oral glands start breaking down. So they're adding enzymes to the buccal cavity to start, they lubricate and start the breakdown of food. So these are a whole bunch of salivary glands. Some oral glands are toxins for immobilizing prey. So this is just showing you a slice through of a dog's mouth. Here's here's the tongue, right? And you can see all these glands, parotid gland, mandibular gland, sublingual glands. Well, the lacrimal gland is for tears, but then there's so most of these are glands for saliva production, for starting to put enzymes into the mouth for breaking down food. There's a couple special glands in snakes called Hardarian glands, which is for this is to lubricate the nictitating membrane of the eye, meaning that there's a membrane that covers the eye it's like a third membrane. And Duvernoy's gland, which has venom in some snakes. So special venom glands. And here's a viper has this type of venom gland, independently derived venom gland in the viper's snakes. And again, I think I showed you this. There's actually a little canal as it's this fang comes out and it goes into the prey. That is literally like a little needle injecting venom into the prey. So they strike, stab it, and then they don't hold on to the prey. They'll strike, just inject the venom, and then wait for it to die, and then they go and ingest it. Okay, second part of the digestive system is the posterior parts. Okay, so there's a lot happening in the mouth, but then there's essentially a long tube, and that tube is divided into sections. You remember that is one of the features of vertebrates, that a gut that's divided into different parts and is muscularized, right? Okay, so we're going to talk about the gut now. So the gut needs to break down the food to useful nutrients. It uses enzymes and symbiotic microbes to do that breakdown. So it serves as a reservoir of bacteria that are symbiotic with the animal to help break down food. It also has to absorb water, and it has to be able to repair itself. The gut lining has to be protected and then be able to repair and regenerate. So we'll talk about all these features. Starting in the anterior, there's the pharynx. So in fishes, the food passes by the gill rakers, and in tetrapods, so the embryonic development of the lungs is very close to the we talked about that just last time, that that pharynx has both the end, because of that, the lungs essentially develop as a derivative of a swim bladder, right? That's why we can choke on our foods, because of our ancient fish ancestry that put our esophagus right next to our trachea, right? So we have those two openings right next to each other just because of our deep ancestry as a fish. The opening to the lungs is very close to the developing gut opening. That's in the pharynx. And the food is prevented from entering the lungs, as I said last time, because of the glottis in the floor of the pharynx. And the mammals also have an epiglottis that, as you swallow, it's closing up your trachea and letting the food slide past to get into the esophagus. In this region in the pharynx, there are a couple immune-related organs that I want to mention. The thymus, again, remember that this is a general feature of vertebrates. Thymus is derived from pharyngeal pouches. It's part of the adaptive immune system. It produces T cells. Our tonsils are also lymphoid organs located in the anterior pharynx. So you've had your tonsils out. It used to be thought that they didn't have any purpose, but they now know that they are part of your immune system. Buccal cavity and the pharyngeal cavity is essentially this back part. There's this trachea and the esophagus right next to it. Esophagus is, where's this one is esophagus. Okay, so next I want to talk, I think, what am I talking about next? Oh, okay. Oh, this is just, I'm not sure. I think there was no other place to put this. So I just wanted to show you this cool picture of tongue protrusion in a woodpecker. Um, so the tongues are kind of amazing in many tetrapods. We know about the protrusion of the tongue in lizards and in frogs, and this is a woodpecker. The woodpecker can stick his tongue into holes and get bugs, right? So look at this hyoid apparatus. It literally goes all the way over over the skull, right? Look at this huge hyoid apparatus extends the tongue. So some bizarre adaptations. Where does the gut come from? So the gut tube. So I think I mentioned at some point far back that essentially the vertebrate body is a tube within a tube. We're kind of like a donut, right? We have a hole in the middle, which is the gut going from our mouth to the anus, and then all the other tissues are around it, right? So it's sort of, we have this. So the inside, the gut, um, the gut is derived from the endoderm. So we have that tube, and there are many organs that evolve from budding off of the gut tube, right? So they have these placodes that bud off, like the lungs, liver. So here you can see in the embryo, this is the head of the embryo here, and this is the body going back to the tail. And this shaded in part is the gut tube into the anus. Here's the yolk sac. But you can see in this gut tube at this, this is probably, this is sort of not the earliest embryo, but kind of a mid-stage embryo in the early organogenesis stage. You can see the thyroid. There's a bud for the liver, the lung, the stomach, the pancreas, the intestine. So a lot of our internal organs bud off of the endoderm in the embryo, okay, off the gut tube, and then it becomes, depending on the species, there all this regionalization and species specific shapes of each organ. Okay, adaptations of the gut tube. It's the gut tube length. If the length of the gut, so compare it, an active endotherm has a longer gut than a passive ectotherm. Okay, so they need more energy from metabolism, so they need to have more gut to process more food. Smaller animals have relatively longer guts than larger animals, so relatively, right? So again, smaller animals tend to be more active too, so they have relatively longer guts. And herbivores have relatively longer guts than carnivores because grasses and plants are harder to digest because vertebrates can't digest cellulose. They need a long gut with lots of microbial help in order to break down enough to eat. So herbivory is actually a derived condition because you have to have a lot of special features in order to get enough energy from plants breaking them down, right? So you have to have this long gut tube, evolution of teeth and microbes and all sorts of things. So carnivores are more of the ancestral type, if we wanted to put them in a category, and herbivores require more derived features. Okay, so looking at the anatomy of the gut tube, there's some layers we can talk about. So just imagine the tube, right? So the innermost part of the tube is called the mucosa. Okay, so this it's a simple epithelium, so organized columns of cells that line the inside of the gut tube. has lots of blood vessels there as the food's being broken down, so they can take those the nutrients and deliver them to build tissue elsewhere as needed in the body, right? So they meet with the circulatory system and lymphatic vessels to receive absorbed materials from the gut lining. The mucosa also has the gut villi and microvilli. So this is the folded regions of the inner gut lining that, of course, increases surface area, right? So it's an easy way to increase surface area, just like we talked about with the respiratory system, increasing surface area. So you can have greater diffusion of gases in the gut. You increase the surface area, so you have greater ability to pass on the absorbed nutrients, right, from your food. The mucosa also has lymphocyte nodules, so part of the immune system is connected with the gut. They have goblet cells, which secrete mucus. The crypt of Lieberkühn, which is a feature of the mucosa between, so if you have these, the gut villi, right, of this villi, that's where stem cells reside. And if the gut lining is damaged anyway, then that's where it regenerates, so that it can replace the lining that sloughs off during the digestive process. So it's called the crypt of Lieberkühn. And then at the outer border, so as you go outward around that mucosa, there's a muscularis mucosa, so a thin layer of smooth muscle at that outer border, right? So we need the muscle. So underneath that, are going farther out, right, is the submucosa, and that's highly vascularized fibrous connective tissue. And that alternates then going outward with muscularis layers that are in longitudinal muscularis and a circular layer. And these muscle layers control peristalsis, so the movement of, remember, as I mentioned a minute ago, that the gut is muscular, so it has these smooth muscles that move the food along. It's not passive. And here's a nice picture of, here's the lumen, so the opening in the middle of the gut. Here's the muscularis layer and these villi, right? This movement like this. Okay. There's this layer, some of the features I mentioned, like lymphoid nodules, so on. Then there's the submucosa around it that's very highly vascularized, and then there's these layers of muscle around that. So the muscle goes, let's see if I picture here. No. Okay, so the muscle goes, the tube is around, let's see if, I'm not sure if you can see me here. So that there's muscles that go around the tube like this, right, around. And then there's muscles that go longitudinally and kind of, you've got these two layers of muscle with different orientations. So, and they're smooth muscle, and they're also involuntary muscle. So when you eat something, they're contracting, and that muscle, that's just moving the stuff along, because that spiral muscle, right, is moving it directionally. And then you've got the circular muscle that also works with that. So those two muscles together are just moving the food along the gut tube. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. So there's, yeah, the other things. They have the crypts of Lieberkühn here, right at the base of these of the villi. So we've got lots of the features shown in this one image here. Okay, so this is the next part of the so most vertebrates have a stomach as a a segmented, region of their gut. So there is, so the food comes in the esophagus into the stomach region. The stomach is intended to hold the food, right? And so it doesn't rot, right? So it tends to be acidic. So the lining, so things are a little different in the stomach. It still has villi. This part that sticks up like this is called the fundus, right? So there's sphincters at the anterior and posterior. Yeah. So the stomach has again the same kind of lining. It has the mucosa and the submucosa, but it differs in the different regions. So here's, okay. So this is the epithelium, the gut lining, as you go from anterior to posterior in in the gut tube. So at the esophagus, it's very thin. As you get into the stomach, you start getting this here, and they have this, the stomach lining tends to be, the stomach fluids tend to be acidic, so it's holding, and it's like a storage of the food, and then it's passed on to the small intestine, and then it changes from acidic to it becomes more the pH neutral. So this Brunner's gland releases mucus to change the pH, right? And then look, this is where you get these villi and microvilli, and very, very, very. So this is the area where most of the digestion and absorption of materials is happening in the small intestine. As you get farther back, then there is this is where the water absorption is happening, and the villi is much less there. So you can see it's like very regionalized, and different functions in different places. Here, so this is showing the muscle layers. It's kind of peeling it away here. You can see the vascularization of the gut in these different layers, right? And then there's this circular muscle. So let's see, some specializations. Okay, so the esophagus is the part that's connecting the pharynx to the stomach. It is specialized in some animals. So sometimes they have a very tough esophagus to crush eggs, like egg-eating snakes. Sometimes in birds have what's called a crop, and where they have a little section of their esophagus where they hold the seeds to kind of soften them up and ferment them for a while before they pass them on. So because they have to, if they eat seeds, they're too hard and they would just go straight through their gut. So they need to soften them up and get them so that they can be digested. So that's part of the esophagus. Doves and pigeons actually produce a milky secretion to feed their young. So they have the young actually reach into the parent's esophagus and eat this milky secretion out of there. Here's the trachea of a snake, and you can see there's not a lot of pre-processing. It's just putting the food in there. The stomach. Okay, so as I was mentioning a minute ago, the stomach is for food storage. That region of the gut evolved so that you can hold larger food items caught less frequently, so that you could digest and make the best use of your capture item, right? Without having to capture constantly. So you can hold larger food items and then slowly digest them. There's a hypothesis that the acidic environment of the stomach evolved to kill the bacteria in the gut so it would preserve food, so that the large prey item that you had could sit in your stomach and not, they would be able to hold it for a while. And I mentioned the sphincters, or the valves at both ends, pyloric sphincter, and sometimes a cardiac sphincter at the rostral end of the stomach. Some enzymes in there, but it's not the main digestive location. Again, it's for storage, not digestion. Some specializations of stomachs in some vertebrates. In some reptiles and birds, the stomach becomes a muscular gizzard, which grinds up food. So the gizzard sometimes even has stones in it, and it has really tough, if you ever can dissect a bird, you'll come across this very, very super muscular part of the gut, and that is called a gizzard. Maybe in your turkey at Thanksgiving, you can look for it. They have a gizzard. And then some vertebrates have multi-chambered stomachs. So you probably heard of the cow having many stomachs. So that's also in hippos, camels, giraffes, sheep, cows. So the reason they have in these multi-chambered stomachs is because to allow this slow passage time, again, to let it kind of soften and ferment, and variably let different microbes have, colonies of microbes to help break it down in different ways. Here's just a couple different stomachs. This is a kangaroo. Here's the esophagus, these little pouches here with some fermentation going on. So I guess in herbivores especially, the stomach has a fermentation role. It's a camel. Here's just showing the how they so here's what is this? This is I can't remember. I should have written more about it, but it's definitely it's something about fermentation of plants. I'm not sure. Okay. All right. Here is the here's some of the guts, the stomachs, and the partitions in various vertebrates. So the esophagus, here's the different color codes. Some of them have a gizzards. Some of them have cardiac sphincters. Here's a lamprey. Lampreys don't have a stomach, only an esophagus and the intestine. Okay, so now getting to the intestine. Okay, so after the stomach, then there are the pancreas and the liver basically dump in a bunch of enzymes and bile for of the stomach. Then not only is it got this villi that starts getting bigger for absorption of materials, that's where the associated organs start dumping in all these chemicals to help with the breakdown of the food. Okay. So secretions of the liver are the bile, and the pancreas are the digestive enzymes. Bile is alkaline, changes acidity to be more conducive to the pH needed for microbial breakdown. So remember, stomach is more acidic, needs to change the pH as it starts to break it down. So the bile is helping that. Also in bile are these bile salts, which help emulsify fats, so they're more available for breakdown by enzymes. So fat is really hard to break down, so that's the bile helps with emulsifying the fats. In some animals, there's a gallbladder, like we have a gallbladder, right? So the bile accumulates in the gallbladder so that when it's needed, it kind of just gets squirted into the gut and through the bile duct. And it's especially needed in animals that eat a lot of fats, like carnivores. Pancreatic enzymes are many, there's many types, and they are specific. So there's proteases that break down proteins, lipases that help break down fats, and amylases that break down starches. This is just a zoom in of the bile duct and the hepatic portal vein. So there's actually a specific blood flow that goes between the liver and the gut to facilitate this kind of the breakdown. So yeah, the bile is collecting in the bile ducts and then stored in the gallbladder, emptied into the duodenum when needed to emulsify fats. Here's just a picture of the pancreas. Here's the pancreas, again, dumping its enzymes into the duodenum. Duodenum is the name for the anterior part of the intestine, small intestine. Okay, so digested materials are absorbed by the lumen and either by diffusion or facilitated diffusion. So fatty acids are just diffused across the mucosa, and facilitated diffusion, there are carrier molecules that bind to some of the materials and move them across the membrane. So there's these are adaptations to to quickly get the good stuff out of the food and and move it across the membrane into the circulatory system. Some animals have both a small and a large intestine. The large intestine is wider. This is all highly variable and related. The overall length of the intestine is several body lengths long in carnivores and much longer, up to 25 body lengths in herbivores. So as you know, they're kind of wound up in our body. They have differentiated small intestine. Duodenum is more anterior. The jejunum is the name for the next part, and the ileum is the more posterior part. And these are based on where the digestion happens, and that is, of course, with the degree of vascularity, or where, you know, how much blood vessels are there to absorb things. So the more anterior is where there's more of food absorption. The ileum is where there's more water absorption. Some other posterior regions in the digestive tube. The cecum is there's a cecum in mammals. That's where the small intestine meets the large intestine. The colon is the more posterior part that varies in size. In birds, the colon discharges into the cloaca, which is a general opening. So rather than going to, like in mammals, the colon ends in the rectum and then the anus. In birds, and also in reptiles too, the cloaca is a general opening where the urinary bladder, reproductive organs, and the colon all discharge into this one opening, the cloaca. Appendix exists in some mammals, including humans, and it's probably important in the immune system. Here's some, I think I just have a bunch of pictures for the end here. So here's some of the different differentiation in different fishes. So here's, this is amia, this is a toad. So you can see that, the stomach, small intestine, large intestine, right? Small intestine, large intestine. So they've kind of laid it out so the comparisons kind of made easier here, and some of the features. And so this is some birds, and so this is obviously amphibians, some reptiles, and some birds. And here are some mammals. So you start to see how much more length you get in the small intestine, some of these mammals. And this is just showing some of the associated organs and where they show up: gallbladders, livers, pancreas. This is all from your book. And oh, I already mentioned this. So this is just a picture showing the bird with the crop that stores and ferments. Here we go, crop. And then esophagus, it's called the proventriloquus at the end, triculus at the end here. And then it's very muscular gizzard. And here's just some foregut and hindgut fermenters. So again, lots of diversity in diets, lots of diversity in digestive systems. So, right. Okay, so are there any questions on that one? We have a few minutes left. I can talk about anything if you have comments. Okay, oh, yes, I'll stay here. So that's, anybody who wants to meet with me can stay. Otherwise, have a good weekend.
Bye, Professor.
Is that Grace?
No, that's Pearl.
Girl, oh, hi. There's Grace. Did you want to talk to me?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Did you want to talk to me? I saw your note.
Yes, I had missed my other meetings, the ones that I had scheduled with you. I was wondering if we could have that meeting now before I submit my script.
Sure. Let me. All right. Let me pull up your research. So yeah. So basically, what I was telling everybody is that what you need to do is take the research that you did. Can you tell me what your topic was again?
Yes, mine was the larynx.
The larynx. Okay. So yeah, I think you I'll just pull it up. Just give me a second.
Okay.
Sometimes very clunky to have two things open at once. Let me. So I was asking everybody what what features you thought were like of interest, because right now you have to you have to take what you've learned about it and then pick like one or two things to make your script.
Okay.
Grace. What's her last name? Almost there. Hold on. There we go. Oh yeah. Okay. So you, yeah, you, your first part, you focused on the length of the throat got larger and the mouth got smaller. Okay, yeah, I think you said that several times. And then, yeah, elongation of the neck, shrinking. Okay, so yeah, so I would, did you have an idea about what you wanted to focus on? I'll let you comment first before I jump in.
So for the two, like for the things that we were supposed to focus on, you said we were supposed to focus on like two kind of topics, right?
Yeah, one or two things, that you can get into 3 minutes. It's not much time.
Oh, okay. I wanted to kind of talk about the like how it develops, because as I was reading about it, it was talking about like how um that part of like the throat, like it even develops like it develops up until a human's puberty, like up until puberty, and like its changes. I kind of wanted to focus on that, and also like the differences of it between different vertebrae, because I also read that in humans it's much lower compared to other vertebrae where it's like higher up in their neck.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Those are two interesting points. So, yeah, so maybe for you, um, yeah, so focusing on the voice box or the vocal cords
Hmm.
in particular, you could compare them with our nearest ancestors and what's known about, other hominids, and what's different about the voice box in, to become human. And then also, like you said, developmentally, what happens over as you go through adolescence, how
Yeah.
the voice box changes. I think that's a really great. Everybody will be very interested in that, I think, because it's such everybody's voice changes
Right.
as you get older, right? These little squeaky little kids, and then
Exactly.
you know, and you could definitely have some fun with that too in your filming.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a great idea. So
Okay.
so now let me just see. Did you get uh, your I didn't get a chance to look at them, but let me just see.
I'm sorry, Professor. What was that? You froze for a second.
I'm just looking at your the references that you have.
Okay.
So yeah, it looks like okay, I didn't have a chance to pull up the actual PDFs, but make sure, so I'm telling everybody, just make sure you have your like good quality scientific references for any statement you make. Just, be like sure that it's got some evidence to back it up,
Yeah.
So they look like, generally it looks good. You have some medical sites and some journals. So I'll have to look into those.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
just yeah, when you do your script, just at the bottom, like put the references that I can check. Okay.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
All right. Have fun then.
All right. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.